Oh, hey, I'm Joe Mack. Welcome back to the channel. We did it. All roads lead to Gododin. Shadows upon time. Let's see how Christopher ended his series. Great. That's the video. No, I'm just kidding. Christopher did a great job. I think he nailed the landing. He definitely wrote a final book that left me both feeling satisfied and wanting more. And I think in a series like Sun Eater, which is so epic in scope, and truly lives up to that space opera name, it's done the right way. Not every single loose end is tied, and that's true. This is a very meta story, and by that I mean Christopher, the author, wrote a story as Hadrian, the character, writing his story, and he sticks to that framework to a fault. Some people might not dig it. I think it was very well executed across all 7 books. And I think that when you remember that that is the case and that that is how this is being written, this book really lands home for sure. I think that it was done very well. And this is not a book that I can talk about without going into specific things. So we're going to do a little bit of some, spoiler-free, generic comments on how well the series was ended. And we're going to get right into talking about this book. I understand that some people might be going through the series or might want to read the series and might be checking out videos, seeing if it's worth the time investment. So I do think that for those people, I do want to say, he sticks the landing, that this book finishes the story that's told in a very Sun Eater way. Is it perfect? It's close, but nothing is. Is it my favorite of all 7 books? Howling Dark remains my favorite. And that's one amazing thing about this series is almost anyone you ask is going to have a different top book. They're going to have a different ranking order of these books. And I think that just speaks to the strength of the series as a whole. I think the series is worth reading. I think that it is Lord of the Rings in space. It is a living, breathing universe. It has so much going on. It has a real history. It has languages, races, civilizations, different governments. It has all of those things, mythologies. It has its own religions. I think there was a word I was looking for there, and it wasn't religion. It was like an over-encompassing word of what religion is. Theology, that's it. It has its own theologies going on, multiples of them. It connects, like Dune does, back to us. It is our far future, right? I think it accomplishes all the goals that it sets out to accomplish. I think Sun Eater, if you had to ask me, on a pass-fail system, it's pass. This is a success. I think it's worth reading. Do I think everyone's going to like it? No. I mean, that's clear. The loudest people are going to be the people who don't. I've been making Sun Eater content since July. For my whole reread, participating with the Red Company Discord, doing all these things, participating in that wonderful community, rereading these books and up to this finish. And it's been so enjoyable for me, but it's also shown me that just as there are those who are fervent supporters of this story, unfortunately, there are also those who go out of their way to let you know that they don't like the series and why, and that's fine. Not everything can be for everybody, and if it was something that was for everybody, I don't think it would be good. I think what makes it so great for me and for those that enjoy it is because of all the things that it does well and the way that it does them. If you're watching this because you want to know if it's worth the investment, the first book, he wears his inspirations on his sleeve. The second book, the universe expands and really opens up. The first book's a prologue. It's getting to know Hadrian as a child, to see his growth and where he ends up by the end and why. You know, it's a slower read. It is space opera to a T. It is not an action movie. It is not an action series. Is there action? Yes, but it is not at the forefront, and it is not what it is about. Some of the best scenes and the best pieces that take place in this series are conversations. And that's really my best way to illustrate to anyone who hasn't read it or is thinking of reading it or might be in book one and aren't sure. It's worth it. Read it. You know, if you don't like it by the end of Howling Dark, thanks for trying. More Sun Eater for me, and that's fine. But if you're past book two, I mean, it doesn't stop. This is my favorite series, period. Not sci-fi, not space opera, not modern. I think it's my favorite. So, with that being said, some of this, yeah, it's biased for sure. I appreciate that I got to be alive and experience this as it was happening. And I'm trying to kind of like live in that moment with it, where I don't look back on it later and say like, wow, I should have done something or really appreciated it when I could. And I've been doing that. I went to the gala. I'm participating in the community. I've met the author. I've shaken his hand. I've gotten the autographs, which if you want those, Quail Ridge Books, if you want to order any of the books in any format, down in the comment section before you hit checkout, say that you're willing to wait for Christopher Ruocchio to sign your book, and when he has time, he'll come by and sign it. And even that's like an incredible thing. But I digress. I think that's all I really want to say in this video. That's spoiler free. I would like to talk about the book. So anyone who doesn't want to know any of the specifics, thank you for stopping by. And for everyone else, let's get to it. Thanks for sticking around. You know, I don't know exactly where I want to start with this, so I'm kind of just going to go in order of kind of how the book takes place. I didn't dislike the beginning. I didn't love it, but I didn't dislike it. I thought that it showed some of Christopher's growth and ability as an author to write these multiple POVs, but it was very hyper meta, right? We have an author writing a story as a person writing his story while writing the stories of other people telling their stories. Very storyception, and I think it was executed well. I understand why it was taking place. I think it was organic. I question, and this is defended by the fact that Hadrian is for sure an unreliable narrator. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes I believe on accident, because he lets us know time and time again he doesn't have a scholastic memory. He doesn't have a perfect memory. So his ability to recount what other people said and how they describe their stories, is obviously brought into question. But it was fresh, and it was nice to see within the mainline series some other perspectives of things. Um, did it last too long? I don't know. Right. The information that was revealed about the Chantry, I think, at least for me, overshadows really most of any of the negative feeling that I would have had while experiencing it, like in the moment. Obviously, if I look back on it and I want to nitpick it, I can probably find some criticisms. I can I can probably find some things that I didn't like about it. But besides it, me experiencing or realizing during the moment that it was like a very meta move to do, the information about the Chantry overshadowed all of that. Knowing that they are like the root of all evil, that they have been using demons and AI this whole time, and the vindication that Hadrian gets to experience as someone who has hated the Chantry throughout his whole story and has questioned why others are praying to a rock in space, to Earth. And it also pulls into question how much of his comments and in his writing are influenced by the information that was later revealed to him. How much of the stuff that, or his opinions that he may have had in his earlier life, did he change in his writing because of what he learns? I think that it's hard to share your opinion if it's changed drastically, or if to ignore certain information that you may have. And that revelation really kind of puts other things into a different perspective that we learned previously. And on another reread in the future, having ourselves all of that information might shed light on some things that are going on. You know, and furthermore, if I just stick to Chantry items and talk about the Chantry now, you have Yod, who in the end is clearly, there's some transmission of thought form happening. Like these people have been killed at least one time for sure, right? Like some of the other stuff's left up in the air, I think, but at least to me it's illustrated at the end of the book, right, that just like Minos, just like certain exalted extrasolarians, the Prince Priors are transmitting their thought form when under great duress. So there's so much going on. The strength that the Chantry has in military might and technology is astonishing. It is they have continued to progress through the help of this AI when the rest of the Empire and universe at large, sans Minos and the Extrasolarians, Karn, which has stayed stale or stagnant, makes you wonder why they waited so long. And I think that that's more of a political angle, right, where they can seize by power, but they don't want to lose the people, because we're talking about something at such a grand scale that I don't think it's so easy as I have the bigger gun. It might be as far as like how to win the fight, but I think it's kind of like a win the battle, win the war type situation. As I've thought about it, I finished the book a couple days ago, and I've tried to like process and really think about what I wanted to talk about and what I wanted to say, because you know there's so many of these are popping up, and how I wanted to spend my time talking to you guys and what I wanted that to be. And the Chantry reveals were very impactful, very enlightening, and I think, you know, especially this series is something else rereading it as I did this year, and all the things that you see that Christopher had known from the beginning, and the little tidbits that he's planted along the way. It's one of the reasons why I compare it to Lord of the Rings, is the more information you have and the harder you look, the more you see. There's so much going on all the time. I'm not saying, before anyone attacks me, I think Christopher Ruocchio is a fantastic writer. I'm not saying he's Tolkien. I'm just saying that in scope, Sun Eater, I think, lives up to or close to Lord of the Rings. I think if we're going to talk about the Chantry, the next real natural step to take is to talk about Alexander and how he was a very well written character. And, you know, I hate him, obviously. He is a sniveling coward and a cur. You know, but he was written great. He serves his purpose. Just like many others, one of the loose threads here is like, I hate that he has any sense of victory. Regardless of how much of a puppet he may be, or that he is emperor only in name and not in action, I can take small solace in that. Like, I'm not very comfortable with him winning in any way, especially with wounding Hadrian before his hanging. Very gladiator-esque with the stab in the ribs. Just every time he opens his mouth, it's nails on a chalkboard. And I'm meant not to like him. So I think it's important to, I don't like the character, but he's a great character. Does that make sense? William, his father, fantastic character. I think he has a lot of ups and downs in the series. I think that if you just look at what's on the page and you take it the way that Hadrian explains it, William's a fantastic emperor and a great dude, right? But when you look at 1,000 years of rule, even choosing to put Alexander in the position where he could be and ends up being the next emperor, passing over Selene, beautiful, wonderful, lovable, fantastic Selene, to take his place, or anyone else, especially after all the things that are going on with Hadrian, his trusted sword, and the fact that never stops. Like, William's not blind. He knows what's going on with the Chantry and all these things. To see their influence over Alexander to never change the path that's been set, or to pick, and I don't, everything we know is from Hadrian's perspective. So maybe there's stuff going on in the background and stuff we're not privy to because Hadrian wasn't privy to it, and why William would allow that to continue and for that potential to still exist at this point, this many hundreds of years down the line. It is what it is. But the way that William acts in front of and the decisions that he makes for and about Hadrian are commendable. That in the end, I think he makes the right call and he makes the right move, and he does what is important for the citizens of his empire to survive moving forward, especially with this extraterrestrial, that I don't even think that word really encapsulates, but this eldritch enemy threat to the survival of his species. Making Hadrian the emperor does make sense. He's the one who can do the most against this enemy. So Selene, right? Let's just go down the whole family line. Talk about all the Aventines, right? Selene's incredible. And she continues to prove, she showed us in Demon in White just a sprinkling of who she was. And in Disquiet Gods, I officially became a Selene bro. And it solidified the way that she acted towards, around, and to Hadrian and Cassandra and Valka in Demon in White, right? Like, she makes the right decisions. She's intelligent. She's witty. She's kind. She's all the things that would make a great leader. And that continues to show itself in Shadows Upon Time, that she's there to support Hadrian. She knows what's going on. She does question things at certain times, or at least experiences some level of regret and sadness about how her entire life has been directed and made for and or about Hadrian. But I think she's there to do more than just support Hadrian. She is a representative of the ultimate good in the empire. She has almost no flaws through Hadrian's eyes. And it's simply Hadrian being a child, or being incapable of moving on or expressing how much Valka meant to him, that he is unable to properly have a relationship with Celine until he does. I think that's too bad. Unless he is purposely leaving things out. My guy whiffed. I mean, it's really too bad. That's one, my biggest regret is not seeing more Hadrian Celine romance, or the way that the book ends and the open-endedness of it, but his very direct and very adamant telling of never finding her, looking for her, but never seeing her again, I only hope is a lie and is something to keep anyone who reads this from looking for her. I pray, or my headcanon at least, is that they do, upon his resurrection, he finds her and they do live happily ever after. That's how I want it, and that is how it will be for me. I think the fights and the action in this book are hard to execute, and I think Christopher did a good job. The Watchers having this incredible power over the universe, literally over the universe, and able to make it so that they don't just one-shot everybody, and to make it compelling, to make us wonder what's going to happen, to stress urgency in these scenes, I think is a feat that needs to be recognized. He takes the time to explain why Hadrian is able to hide or travel or do anything without being seen, that Karn knew about everything that was going on, and that him and brethren developed Demiurge specifically to not allow the Watchers to see where they were so that they could travel unseen. And everything that Christopher does has always been deliberate, and to see that that was planned from the get is incredible. I think that it's very hard to execute what's going on with when you introduce beings who are literally larger than life, and at no point did any of the battles or events seem cheap. It was truly terrifying. Ushara and Mutinar taking over people's minds in the midst of picking ships up and ripping them apart, and Hadrian traveling on a different plane, and everything that he does. You know, I didn't ever really question what was going on, why or how. Everything that I needed to know was presented to me in a way, and I was immersed enough to believe and accept the things that I was being told. This is also the largest Sun Eater book, and yet I found that besides maybe the beginning, I felt like it was paced quite well. You know, the whole time, you can check 115 Readings review on the book, and I think he put it perfectly, is that it felt kind of like the whole time the book was edging you towards when you finally got to blowing up the sun at Gadadin. That the whole time we're waiting and waiting for it to blow. And I never lost interest. I kept turning every page or getting to each chapter thinking, like, is this finally when it happens? And when it does finally happen, it feels right. It feels like everything that's happened up to then makes sense. And it's just shocking to me looking back on it that we make it 80-ish chapters, you know, before it finally does happen. And that it's not the necessarily biggest moment of the book at all. I mean, it's definitely a big moment, but to say it's the largest one, I think would be incorrect. I think it's just another part of the story, especially the revelation that the Cielson really killed the planet, and that the narrative of Hadrian having done everything that he did was from Alexander and the Chantry. Hadrian does blow up the sun. That is something that he does, but the fallout from that is not as devastatingly drastic and his fault as originally implied. Most of the criticisms that I've seen of this book have been of its Hadrian becoming holier than thou or preachy nature, and that it ends when and how it does. First, I don't think anyone's opinion or criticism is wrong. It's their opinion and it's how they felt, and whether or not I agree with it is irrelevant. But I would like to say that I think it makes sense that Hadrian became so preachy and holier than thou because he literally met the Quiet, which created the universe. Whether it's a simulation or whether it's not, the Quiet created it in Sun Eater. I think that the only part I didn't like about the way that Hadrian turns out or becomes or acts in Shadows Upon Time is constantly reminding everyone that it's not your God, it's the Quiet. If the Quiet created everything, the Quiet created their God, so their gods are kind of like the Quiet. Like he's literally called the Absolute. So it feels like he could have maybe handled that differently, but it is very Hadrian to say like my God's better than yours. So it tracks. I just didn't like his attitude in those situations. I felt like he could have handled that stuff better. And I also really appreciate the way that the book ends. You know, like I said 27 minutes ago, the book doesn't wrap it all up. And I think that that's done well. I think that Hadrian exclusively leaves information out for a good reason. I think that it's a very meta way to end the book, the way that it's written. Christopher really committed to the bit of Hadrian's the person writing these stories. And I think that tracks. I would love to know when, how, and where he comes back and what he got up to from when he comes back to where he is now. What he means by just playing Scholiast. Whose other glass is sitting with him? Did he really never meet up with Cassandra again? I think that this ends Sun Eater in a very Sun Eater way. I think it allows Christopher, if he chooses in the future, to fill in some gaps, right? I think that as a business decision, it is intelligent and strategic. I also think if we get nothing else from Hadrian about Hadrian in that time period between the end of Shadows Upon Time and when he's writing it or thereafter, I think it's fine. I think that it allows me to pretend that Hadrian and Selene live forever together happily, right? And if Christopher writes it a different way, then that's the real way. And it might not be that way. And I'd rather it be my way. But that's it. That is the final book in Hadrian's adventure for Sun Eater. When I got to the end, I felt very empty. The last time, when I knew I was reading There Are Endings Reader for the last time, I felt very empty, very sad. I really, truly did. I've really enjoyed this journey. I know the books aren't going anywhere and I can read them again. I know Christopher has a short story called Life coming out in a short story collection that I think kickstarts in January. I know that he can write other stories in this universe. So it's not truly over, but for Hadrian, I believe it is. And it's bittersweet. I'm happy to finally see the sun blow up. I'm happy to have read all the books, but I'm sad that it's over. I'll never experience any of them for the first time again. And there's something in that, I guess is what I'm trying to say, you know. But if you've made it this far, thanks for sticking around. How did you like Shadows Upon Time? Did you think that the ending, the openness, the cut to black that it was appropriate? Did it fit Hadrian's melodramatic nature? Did you wish it continued on? Do you also think that Hadrian and Selene lived happily ever after? How did you like that hyper meta beginning? Did it scratch an itch for you in Sun Eater, or was it more abrasive? Did you think he handled battling two eldritch beings well? Let me know any and all of your thoughts and what you're looking forward to next from Christopher, being the Doomsong Saga as he delves into sword and sorcery. Get in those comments. I love you guys. Bye. Like it.